Good evening, my name is Toby Lepatty Mesme. Thank you for joining me this evening. This is MesmePolitics, live with you until 7:30, bringing you all the latest in UK and US politics from a unique leftist perspective. It's just gone 7 p.m. on Monday, the 18th of January 2021, a brand new week, a brand new presidency on the way. And as always, boy have we got a busy show for you. So, coming up, Corbyn in court. The supposed impartiality of the EHRC blown to pieces. Also, we take a critical look on the Trump presidency, what those 4 years meant for America, what they signified, what was unique about them. And coming up next, I want to talk to you about Robert Jenrick and his crazed ramblings about the toppling of statues. But first, we are going to be talking about Boris Johnson. He said another deranged thing. Yes, the government does have a habit of saying deranged things. Well, we're about to bring you, hot off the press, deranged ramblings. Not Robert Jenrick, that'll be in a minute. You know, we're doing a little section on sort of crazy Tories. The first crazy Tory is Johnson. So shall we get talking about Johnson? I think we should. Boris Johnson believes people need to be civil and kind to each other in political debate, his spokeswoman has said, as she accused Labour of making the public worry unnecessarily by debating universal credit and free school meals, saying, "The Prime Minister believes that all of us, in our language and debate, need to remember to be civil and kind to each other." This is Allegra Stratton. She told reporters when asked why Johnson had compared Labour tactics with those used by supporters of Donald Trump. He was also confronted with what he had to say about the fact that he had called his opponents surrenderers. He'd accused them of collusion. The response from Stratton was quite brilliantly, "The key thing is political conduct and debate in the months and years ahead." So not even attempting to defend that there. But basically Stratton said, and Johnson has said, to the effect of Labour, and I'll tell you what, I'll find the exact comments on this. It invoked, of all things, momentum when talking about free school meals. But basically Johnson seeming to be conflating. Well, here it is for you. So he said, "The Labour Party is stoking up the worst kind of hatred and bullying by accusing Tory MPs of being against free school meals." He said to Tory MPs at Sunday lunchtime in a WhatsApp, "Folks, I know that many of you are thirsting to give battle and vote against all Labour motions. But after the shameful way in which they used their army of momentum trolls last time to misrepresent the outcome and to lie about its meaning and, frankly, to intimidate and threaten colleagues, especially female colleagues, I have decided not to give them that opportunity. We can be proud of what we are doing to tackle all the consequences of the pandemic, and if Labour decides to stop playing politics and stop inciting the worst kind of hatred and bullying of a kind seen sadly across the Atlantic, then I may think again about legislatively vacuous opposition debates." Ridiculous. Ridiculous. So momentum has become, for the Tory party, for the British right, it's essentially become a scapegoat, like Antifa in the States, right? We're invoking momentum thugs now, like how, MAGA people will invoke Antifa thugs. The thing is, they're not bothered about the real thing. They're not bothered about what Antifa is or what it means. Basically just means being against fascism. They're not bothered about what Momentum is, which is a very comprehensive organisation, pretty insignificant, that's brought together and organised sort of the left flank of the Labour Party. There's nothing even remotely militant about Momentum, really? The militant people think Momentum are a load of melts. But, Momentum is being used as a scapegoat. It's just a nice benign organisation. I get my emails from Momentum, what's wrong with Momentum? But it's a scapegoat, right? And the reality is, where's all the street violence coming from? Where's the aggression coming from? It's always come from the right. And we're conflating, and there was some of this in the Sunday Times over the weekend, conflating the people that invaded the Capitol in the States with the Corbynite wing of the Labour Party. How morally bankrupt, politically illiterate do you have to get to the point where you're making those conflations? Brazen hypocrisy from Johnson and completely skewed priorities from the government, as we're about to hear from Robert Jenrick. They're basically demonstrating to us right out in the open they have no ideas. That's the secret they don't want you to know. They have no ideas about how to make your lives better, so they're going to scream about momentum trolls and the toppling of statues. Demonstrating brazen hypocrisy, considering, talk about women MPs. Johnson and his rhetoric has contributed to the murder of one woman MP, Jo Cox, during the Brexit referendum. Not directly, of course, I'm not accusing anyone of anything, but he was part of the whipping up of resentment. Although, in fairness, sort of elements to the right of him were much more fervent in that, the Farage-type elements of the Leave campaign. But you got that, and then you had, violence and death threats going to women MPs. He called it humbug. He called people traitors. Journalists like Owen Jones were harassed outside Parliament. All this sort of thing. He's got history on this, and he's got history of showing zero remorse on things like this. So ridiculous. Talking about women MPs. I mean, the brazen, shameless hypocrisy. Anyway, over to Jenrick, and the government has been accused of stoking a contrived culture war in order to distract from its handling of the coronavirus pandemic, as it announces plans to change the law to protect statues from what Robert Jenrick called baying mobs. Labour Party and race equality campaigners says the government should focus on the pandemic instead of statues, of course. Jenrick said any decision to remove heritage assets in England would require planning permission and a consultation with local communities, adding that he wanted to see a considered approach in an article with the Sunday Times, saying, "Our view will be set out in law that such monuments are almost always best explained and contextualised, not hidden and taken away, at the hand of the flash mob or by the decree of a cultural committee of town hall militants and woke worthies." We're being governed by UKIP. We're actually being governed by UKIP. The universal credit debate did go ahead. Here's Keir Starmer on the universal credit fiasco.
Look, this is basic stuff. This £20 uplift has been the difference between making ends meet or not for many, many families. We're at a food distribution centre here. Hear the stories of the families that are absolutely reliant on this. We're still in the middle of a pandemic and the government wants to get rid of that uplift, which is vital to those families. It's the wrong thing to do. I think many Tory MPs in their heart of heart know it's the wrong thing to do. It's about priorities, put families first, keep this uplift. Nobody's talking about scrapping it in the middle of a pandemic. It's a completely false point to take the focus off the real issue. The real issue is, in a pandemic, do you really strip away £20 from desperate families? That's the difference, over a year of about £1,000. That's paying the gas, the electricity and the internet bills. This is what makes ends meet for many families. That's what today is all about, and that's what the focus needs to be on.
Quite right from Keir Starmer there. And it goes on. Here is the latest on Boris Johnson saying things will be very different by the spring. When have we heard that before?
So the point you've got enough to go through the process and the fact now.
Okay, this is very good. So the bioreactors in here.
Yes. So
wow.
This is the main processing room. So each of our facilities we have.
I understand completely that people want to get back to normal as fast as we possibly can. It does depend, Nick, on things going well. It depends on the vaccination programme going well. It depends on there being no new variants that throw our plans out and that we have to militate against. And of course, it depends on everybody, all of us, remembering that we're not out of the woods yet. You can see the pressure that the NHS is under. You can see I'm afraid still the great number of cases that we're seeing every day.
That's Boris Johnson there talking about the state of play during the pandemic. We can hear a little bit more of him here.
I do think that things will be very different by the spring, and you'll have heard that also from Chris Whitty and Patrick Vallance, the Chief Medical Officer and Chief Scientific Advisor. That doesn't mean that we're not going to be living with the consequences of the arrival of the coronavirus pandemic for a while to come. The economic consequences and, of course, the threat to our health as well. And we'll have to remain vigilant about this, I think, for a long time.
He doesn't learn, does he? He's going to overpromise again. He really doesn't learn. And that's going to come back and bite him in the arse politically in the end, isn't it? He's going to keep giving people so much false hope. You know, how do you throw a bone to sort of the COVID conspiracists? By not being straight with people. Be straight with people. Be straight about how long it's going to last. Be straight about the realistic courses of action we're going to have to take. And people will give you the benefit of the doubt. They'll listen to you. They want leadership from their Prime Minister. They're not getting it, but they want it. And they'd be willing to accept it. Honestly. These people in government, this party in government, they're going to be a lot. It's going to take a lot to dislodge them from power, not just because of the way the electorate is shaped and positioned around the country, but also because of the stonking majority last time. Not just because of those two things, but all that aside, it's still going to be extremely difficult to unseat them at the next election because they know, in a way that they hadn't weaponised before, but they now have. And, you know, David Cameron didn't do this, and he barely got a majority, whereas they've done it, and Theresa May didn't do it, and she lost the majority. They have tapped into the cultural grievances and the sort of right-wing, reactionary, populist sort of shape of things. And populism, I can't stress this enough, populism isn't a dirty word. We're talking about a very specific form of populism. But tapping into that, and it handed them the biggest majority since the days of Thatcher, right? What sort of message is that? These people are going to be hard to beat. They know what to do. And even if Johnson's gone, the next leader will know what to do. Labour being less ambitious than the Tories on economics, which is sort of what it looks like when you compare Sunak's statements with the Annalisa Dodd statements occasionally, is going to be disastrous. It will be disastrous. Labour can do well at the next election, but they can also dig themselves a hole that means they sink even further under Keir Starmer's leadership than they did at the end under the previous leadership. That is not a joke. That can happen. Actively working is the only thing that will stop that happening. It's entirely plausible that could happen if they go the direction they're going. Some of the stuff the Tories are saying at the moment is crazy. Most people don't care. But the people who do care, it really resonates with them, and it will turn them out to vote for the Tories. And they often don't vote for anyone, and it will turn them out. They're getting sort of the UKIP demographic, if you like. And that is extremely valuable for them on a national level when it comes to winning in key seats. The Tories have a massive base of support. We know this. We've seen this play out politically. We know they have such a huge, such a huge base, because we're in the pandemic in the situation we're in, and they still won't really go much below 40% and haven't gone below 35%, 36% at any point. And I genuinely believe one of them could be done for murder, and they'd still be sort of level pegging with Labour in the polls. It's really bad. It's really bad. But the support is completely rigid. And people's minds, people don't seem to want to change their mind. That's why Labour they've got a mountain and a half to get anywhere near power in the next couple of election cycles. It's going to be near impossible. There was a window after 2017 where the left and the Labour Party, the PLP, could have seized state power. The PLP decided they'd rather crush the left than ride with the left and seize state power and have a seat at the table in a Labour government. That window has now passed. It may be a decade or more until another window like that opens. We will see. Over to the US, and we are going to be taking sort of an overview look on the Trump presidency. As President Trump prepares to leave office in days, a lucrative market for pardons is coming to a head, with some of his allies collecting fees from wealthy felons or their associates to push the White House for clemency, according to documents and interviews with more than 36 lobbyists and lawyers. The brisk market for pardons reflects the access peddling that has defined Mr. Trump's presidency, as well as his unorthodox approach to exercising unchecked presidential clemency powers. Pardons and commutations are intended to show mercy to deserving recipients, but Mr. Trump has also used many of them to reward personal or political allies. The pardon lobbying heated up as it became clear that Mr. Trump had no recourse for challenging his election defeat, lobbyists and lawyers say. One lobbyist, Brett Tolman, a former federal prosecutor who had been advising the White House on pardons and commutations, has monetised his clemency work, collecting tens of thousands of dollars, and possibly more, in recent weeks to lobby the White House for clemency for the son of a former Arkansas senator, don't get those two mixed, the founder of the notorious online drug marketplace Silk Road, and a former Manhattan socialite who pleaded guilty in a fraud scheme. That's right, draining the swamp.
It was
this is a
very strange.
I thought we'd play this. It went viral. This is a Trump supporter basically saying Trump should pardon her because she raided the Capitol. Hear the entitlement dripping from this lady here.
It was a very strange experience to be arrested by the FBI. They're very professional, and it was a very strange feeling. I felt like I was doing my patriotic duties. So me personally, I do not feel a sense of shame or guilt from my heart from what I was doing. I thought I was following my president. I thought I was following what we were called to do, flying there. He asked us to fly there. He asked us to be there. So I was doing what he asked us to do. So as far as in my heart of hearts, do I feel like a criminal? No. Do I feel guilty? No. But I do feel a little wronged in this situation, because I'm like, okay, I'm a real estate agent, and this has taken my company. It's taken my business. I'm getting slandered all over the internet, all over the world, and all the news. I would like a pardon from the president of the United States. I think that we all deserve a pardon. I'm facing prison sentence. I think that I do not deserve that, and I think every person, from what I understand, everyone's going to be arrested that was there. So I think everyone deserves a pardon, and I would ask the president of the United States to give me a pardon.
Look, I'm not a fan of incarceration. I'm also not a fan of punitive pursuit of protesters either, or even people who raid the US Capitol. I'm not, if you empower these agencies, they'll turn back and attack the left more than the right. Often because the lower echelons of the FBI are literally, far-right sympathisers, and same with the police force. Not at the management level, but sort of down at the lower level. But still, the entitlement, it makes you feel, on a human level, they've got what they deserve there. It's sort of quite satisfying hearing someone facing consequences in a way. Obviously, they're not, they're a white middle-class woman in America. They feel like they shouldn't face consequences for anything. Someone says, be fascinating if he manages to pardon himself now he's been impeached. I know. Very, very interesting. Someone says, why, oh, why didn't they all form a progressive alliance? Couldn't they have in 2017? Well, the Liberal Democrats, in most major part, are so ideologically apart from Labour, it would be impossible to cooperate, right? How could you cooperate with a party that was part of a Tory government? Of course, there are good people in the Liberal Democrats. There are elements of the Liberal Democrats that are good, but they were still on the Brexit sort of fever dream at the time, and they'd just come off endorsing austerity. They basically attacked Labour right through 2017, saying that Tim Farron would be the new leader of the opposition instead of Jeremy Corbyn after the election. I know. It's not just Swinson could be Prime Minister, it's Tim Farron could be leader of the opposition. They really stepped up their ambition after those 10 seats they won. But they, you have that. You have the fact, a lot of them are fiscally liberal and completely sort of endorsers of the free market. How could they work with the Labour Party, particularly Corbyn's Labour Party? But at the same time, as in, why would Labour want to work with them? And at the same time, the SNP has far more to gain out of a confidence and supply agreement rather than joining a Westminster government. So, really, other than the Greens, the Progressive Alliance idea is good. Of course, it would be better going into 2024 with the Progressive Alliance. around sort of a reforming programme. It won't happen. Almost certainly won't happen. The reason for that, and it's the reason it's always not happened, is A, the Lib Dems were formed to stop Labour going to power, basically. But B, there's no, as I say, those roadblocks are so big. The Lib Dems are a hunk of dead weight now. The SNP are on the rise. They don't need to be dragged down by Keir Starmer. And Plaid and the Greens are just doing their thing. The Greens and Labour, great. That's the only thing I can think of. That's why. What should have happened is the PLP should have united behind Labour, and they'd be in a majority government right now. If they'd, helped Theresa May get Brexit over the line, go for an election, they could have toppled the May government. And, bygones be bygones. We are where we are right now. So, the Trump presidency, it came about in unique circumstances, unique dynamics in American society. It was the first president who, in rhetoric rather than action, was a genuine mouthpiece for the far right, right? He was one of the far right in rhetoric and in some policy. In other areas, he was literally just a Ronald Reagan, really, really conservative, regressive, illiberal politician. At the same time, the first president to win an election that I can think of that didn't have the backing of big money and big capital. Of course there are, the conservative media landscape helped him, and sort of dark money on the conservative side of politics, but the vast majority of the big money and the corporate donations went to Clinton in 2016 and went to Biden in 2020. The reason for that is not because he's genuinely anti-establishment. The establishment was against him. The deep state was against him. But at the same time, he served their interests, tax cuts that distributed income up to the 1%, deregulation, decimation of workers' rights, protections, labour laws. So you have that. But he served their interests, but they were against him because he was too not respectable enough. He sort of tore off the face. He was basically the face of American imperialism exposed. And they prefer their imperialist monsters in a more benign form, like Barack Obama or George Bush. Donald Trump, another Donald Trump will rise if the Democrats don't actually make a break with the neoliberal consensus, which is going to be extremely difficult because they are now completely in the pocket of big capital. The Trump administration was a disaster. It couldn't govern. Of course, there were institutional roadblocks trying to stop it, only because Trump deviated very slightly from certain orthodoxies on foreign policy and economics, very slight tinkering with the neoliberal consensus. It drove the establishment mad, even though he would have been a great cash cow for them. He would have brought them in, he would have kept cutting taxes, bringing in deregulation, all these things that would serve the interests of the elite, of the 1%, but he just couldn't keep his mouth shut. If he had, maybe he'd have garnered more backing within the US establishment and the deep state. But that's why the establishment didn't like him. Not because he posed some sort of big threat. Purely because, A, he might tear the whole thing down. B, he was too unpredictable for them. They didn't know if he'd deliver for them. It turns out they were wrong to worry because he basically did consistently. A left candidate would be sabotaged and savaged in an election in the way Trump was by the deep, and in governing by the deep state, in the way Trump was, but times it by 1,000. It was superficial with Trump. A left candidate would pose a real threat. So the visceral, institutional roadblocks are why you need a popular movement behind a left candidate, because there would be so much against them doing anything to get to power, but once they're in power, do anything at all. Trump was one of the worst presidents in US history. Not the worst. The likes of Bush, absolutely worse than him. But he was one of the worst presidents there's been, one of the worst in living memory. Absolutely horrendous president with a horrendous legacy. Good riddance, but let's not be hyperbolic. Let's remember he was a symptom of broader problems, and there were worse, and there could well be worse down the road. Back over to the UK, and it's Corbyn in court. No, he's not being sued, he's suing. Jeremy Corbyn's lawyers had their request for Labour to disclose documents relating to the withdrawal of the party whip from its former leader considered today, the first stage of his possible legal challenge to the party. At a remote hearing at the High Court, Judge Lisa Sullivan considered an application for pre-action discourse by Mr Corbyn's legal team over his suspension from the Parliamentary Labour Party last year. The former leader's lawyers want the party to release papers relating to his initial suspension as a party member and negotiations with his successor, Sir Keir Starmer's office, over his reinstatement. Mr Corbyn had his membership suspended on October the 30th after saying that the extent of anti-Semitism in the party was overstated for political reasons by our opponents, following a clarification in which he said anti-Semitism concerns were neither exaggerated nor overstated. He was readmitted to the party by its ruling National Executive Committee 3 weeks after his suspension. Let's hear Keir Starmer on this. Here.
Blaming somebody else for the mess that they've created.
Today is the first day of Jeremy Corbyn's court case reaching the High Court. I understand we can't talk about legal matters, but what's your message to him as a former Labour leader? Is this helpful? Do you want him to keep going with this court case?
I'm not going to comment on the particular case. I don't want to see the Labour Party tied up in court proceedings. I want to see the Labour Party out there campaigning. So my message across the Labour Party is let's all pull together. We've got a pandemic to deal with. We've got a duty to deliver a better Britain at the end of this. Let's pull together and do that.
Finally, when you became Labour leader, you said that there was a mountain to climb to sort out the Labour Party. Have you climbed it yet, or is there still a long way to go?
Oh, there's still a long way to go. We had a terrible general election result in December of 2019. Everything we're doing is focused on the next general election. It is a mountain to climb. I think we're beginning to climb it. Got a lot of work to do, long way to go. It's going to take every day, every week, every month and every year to that general election. I'm determined to do it. So we're climbing, but there's still a long way to go.
Can you say hand on heart that you're the man who can surprise the electorate, can wow the electorate? Are you, as it were, sexy enough to woo the electorate?
I'm absolutely determined to lead the Labour Party back into government. I came into politics to change lives. You don't change lives in opposition. I'm absolutely determined, absolutely focused. It's not all about me. It's about the whole of the Labour Party, whole Labour movement. We've got a job of work to do, and we're going to do it.
Thank you.
So he's clearly right. He's clearly scared. Corbyn was right in the whole situation. He didn't say anything wrong. He didn't do anything wrong. And if you listen back to the statement, it's wildly different from what was actually quoted in the media. He didn't just come out like, hey guys, anti-Semitism doesn't exist, ha ha ha. No, he literally sat down there and said something to the effect of, it's horrendous, one case is too many, I apologise to anyone who suffered as a consequence of the processes being too antiquated, but 30% of Labour members aren't anti-Semitic. You know, it's true. 30% of Labour members aren't anti-Semitic. It's a tiny fraction. And that is how the media exaggerated it. We know the media exaggerated like that. We know it was weaponised. So he was right. Starmer should have stood down at the time. He's now reaping what he's sowed. He's doomed himself between a rock and a hard place, because if he lets Corbyn back in, he will have all the right-wing sort of pressures on the Labour Party in the PLP and externally coming down on him like a ton of bricks, and some of the Jewish organisations as well coming down on him like a ton of bricks, basically saying, well, you've done that, now you've done that, what are you playing at? Because he's given the right of the Labour Party this, but they never asked for it. You know, even Margaret Hodge didn't ask for this. So once he's done it, if he reneges on it, that makes it a whole thing. He should never have offered it in the first place. He could have, you know, he was too uncomfortable to deal with a day of slightly uncomfortable headlines and then move on. It's ridiculous, because if he doesn't bring Corbyn back in, the left splits, the party falls apart, and the Labour Party will possibly get bankrupted in court. And they will deserve it. Labour's in absolute meltdown, and it's Starmer's doing. It's Starmer's fault. It is his duty now to clean this up. So much for managerial competence, so much for managing a large organisation. Labour under Keir Starmer is closer to bankruptcy than it ever was under Jeremy Corbyn. So, pardon me, just a little voice break there. I thought we'd got rid of those by this point, but final story of the day, I want to talk to you about the EHRC. So Britain's equality watchdog is being undermined by political pressure to support the government's misguided agenda. A former head of the Equality and Human Rights Commission, David Isaac, said he was the chair of the organisation from 2016 until August last year. And he says that a speech by Liz Truss, the Minister for Women and Equalities, last month announcing a shift in government equality priorities away from race and gender made no pretense of the EHRC being independent, and Truss saying the new commissioners would drive this agenda forward. She says, I've appointed a new chair and these new commissioners, and she doesn't say they're going to do my bidding. But it's pretty implicit that what she's saying is they are people who are supportive of her approach to equalities, which is a focus on white working class people in the north of England and the levelling up agenda. My view is that an independent regulator shouldn't be in a position where governments of the day can actually influence the appointments of those that support a particular ideology within that organisation. Yes, the EHRC has been compromised. We all know this. Apparently, saying that is anti-Semitic and you get expelled from the Labour Party, but it is true. It's not a shadowy conspiracy theory. The funding settlement for it has been woeful. It's had to get closer and closer to the government, and the same way with the BBC. It's now dependent on the government. Of course it's towing the line. Of course it's not going to upset the apple cart and deem the Tory party institutionally Islamophobic, even though it is. They just won't do it. I'll close on this today. Keir Starmer would do well to remember he cannot win a general election without the Labour left behind him. Simple as that. All evidence would indicate such. It's not a case of throw them out, get new ones in. If you don't have that base, you're Michael Foot 2.0. So, sort it out. And thanks for listening. See you tomorrow, 7 p.m.